You know, what I think is amazing about just how God has been using you, not only to talk about things in the future, but just the uncanny. That's the word that I kept coming to my mind in reading the book. It's uncanny about the ways in which God has brought you in the past. And one of those was, which I enjoyed reading about, was your trip to Cuba. Now, this was absolutely incredible. Kind of give us some background about, again, and even the way that you interacted with Fidel Castro of all people. It's just tremendous.
Yeah, this is, I normally, I don't put myself in the books, because it's not, it's about the mystery, but I witnessed some things. So I actually witnessed prophetic things. So yeah, I was called, and this kind of begins on that island. I was called to go to the island of Cuba. Fidel Castro, the dictator of Cuba since 1959, he opened up, they were told me he opened up the island for 1 month to allow religious freedom. Then it would close. So they asked me to come, the Christians asked me to come and open it up with the sound of the shofar and then minister throughout the island. And this gathering these events started on one side of the island and ended up in Havana, in Revolution Square. The last event was Revolution Square, and Fidel Castro came to it. And Fidel Castro was watching, I was told several times, he's watching you. He doesn't know who you are. He's saying, what's this Jewish guy doing in the churches? So this guy with a beard causing this ruckus is what he said. So at the end, and there's so much that happened. I won't go through it. There's so much that, the mystery, I was led to speak of the Jubilee, the mystery of the Jubilee. And so much happened along that, but I'll just mention one thing. At the end, I was invited to go into Fidel Castro's presidential palace. And I said, okay, what do I do? I already, before I even left for Cuba, I'll say this, a man gave me a word saying, you're going to enter the king's palace. And so I prepared for that before it happened. And I was led to give him a gift, actually 3 gifts. And one was a Bible, which were banned in Cuba. The next thing was a shofar, which is a sign of the Jubilee. And the third thing was a prophetic word. It was a piece of paper. I wrote down a prophetic word concerning the Jubilee. So it was the sign of the Jubilee is the shofar, and it was the word of the Jubilee. And that actually, Mondo, was the Lord was doing it because it was actually a sign of how much time he would have left. The thing was, was he going to actually allow the kind of revival or allow this month to continue? He didn't. He tried not to, but the revival continued. The revival in Cuba never stopped, but he didn't. And the thing is that, so it was the time. He started in 1959 in a certain month and a certain day, January and a certain day. Well, the amazing thing, Mondo, is the mystery of the Jubilee. When you take what I gave him that, and when you take Leviticus, 7 times 7 years, the 50th year, which is actually once you hit 49, that's the 50th year. What happens is his reign would come to an end in the year of his Jubilee of the reign, the Jubilee, not just the year, the day, the actual Jubilean day, the 50th year, the 50th day, and to the exact hour that Batista, the dictator, abdicated. He abdicated. And it was all there. And so that kind of is setting this mystery that really is actually going to have to do with all of us. This mystery of the Jubilee, that God actually uses it in time and space, is now going to affect all of us. But it began with Fidel Castro on the island of Cuba with the Jubilee.
Yeah, no, it's so amazing. And I love the way that God shows that he is the sovereign God over history, not past, present, and future. And as we start looking towards the future, we're reminded of what God wants to do. And one of the things you bring up in the book is you talk about the prophet Jeremiah and Mount Sinai and how that connects to COVID. Kind of give us a background of that.
Yeah, well, with Sinai, that's the timetable, and that's the Jubilee, that every 50 years you have the Jubilee. Now, the Jubilee, most of us think about that. It's a great thing. Well, it is a great thing, but it's also, there's another side to it. If you lost your land, you get it back in the year of Jubilee. But if you took somebody's land, it's taken from you in the year of Jubilee. So the Jubilee is both, it's restoration, but also restitution. There's an aspect of judgment as well. So you got that, the 50th year. That's one thing. Now, the other piece is this. Jeremiah, he prophesies over the valley of Hinnom, where the people of Israel were killing their children, offering their children. And he says, because of what you did, the blood of the children, it's going to come back to you. It's going to become a valley of slaughter. So the principle is what a nation does to its children will come back to it. If it kills its children, death will come back to it. So now, take this now to America. America began killing its children not in 73, but in 1970. That's when abortion on demand entered America. That's when it first came on our soil. And so where's the Jubilee? What's the Jubilean year? Well, the Jubilean year, the 50th year, is the year 2020. Did anything come back to us? What happened? The year 2020 is the year that the plague comes to America. Now, the world also had partaken in this sin. This is the generation that killed more children than any other, but America was actually leading in this. And the other thing is that Jeremiah says one of the ways that the judgment is coming for what you did to the children is in the form of, in Hebrew, a dever gadol, which in Hebrew means a great plague or a massive pandemic. So it happened in that time, but it's even more uncanny or more specific, because here's the thing. When exactly did abortion on demand make its initial entrance? Well, it was in New York, and it was in the legislature of New York. The bill first appeared that was going to change New York and change America on January 20th, 1970. All right. What happens if you go forward 50 years, one Jubilee? It pinpoints January 20th, 2020. Anything happen? January 20th, 2020 is the day that the plague came to America officially. That was the day of patient zero entering the gates. And so exactly 50 years from when we began, it began with the children. 50 years later, to the day, comes the plague.
This is the stuff that, as I sit back and think about, you can't make this up. And so, if you're watching today, I hope that you just see how God is at work in the lives. He's at work through providence. And one of the things that I appreciated was not only do you have the book, but you give us a little insight about the DVD that you have that goes along with helping people understand.
Oh yeah, it is the Josiah Manifesto Uncensored. This is only available. It's not on Amazon. It's not in any bookstore. This is exclusive. So with Prophecy Watchers here, you can get that. It is 8 one-hour DVDs where I'm putting in what I could not even put in the book. You'll get the overall mystery, but you'll get things. You'll actually see it. You'll see the things happening. You'll see prophetic manifestations captured on videotape. It's beyond. I'll just tell you, it's filled with that. And also, it's sharing all sorts of mysteries that are not even in the book. It's not just more. It has all that. So it's very special. You can show it to your church. You can show it to yourself, but you'll be very blessed. So it's very exclusive. 8 one-hour DVDs. The Josiah Manifesto Uncensored.
Yeah, to me, that's awesome for Bible studies or Sunday school groups or whatever, just to have a weekly teaching. And, to me, I was truly blown away in just reading the book about all the, what we call as coincidences, which we know that that's not really a good theological term. But yeah. One of the things that you talk about in the book is not just the arrival of COVID, but also the other circumstances. I mean, we all remember about being locked up and not being able to go anywhere. Kind of talk about the mystery aspect of that.
Yeah, the entrance of COVID was, we all heard about it, but it didn't affect us yet. It affected us in March for everybody. In the middle of March, or sort of everything happened. Everything hit. The plague fell. It went from, I forgot, it was like a few hundred people had infection. By the end of it, it was like 70,000 people had it. In the middle of March, President Trump goes on the air and announces basically it's come. That was the day. It was called the day that changed everything. And we all remember it. Even if we don't remember the date, it was also the day that we were quarantined. America was quarantined on that day. On that day, the stock market crashed. On that day, the lockdown started falling all over our lives. We were locked down. Within a few days, we were all locked down. It's the day that changed everything, and that's what the media calls it all over. What day was it? It was March 11th. It was March 11th, 2020. That was the day. What happens if you go back one Jubilee to the beginning, 1970? Well, it pinpoints the day, March 11th, 1970. Anything happen? March 11th, 1970 is the actual day that abortion on demand began on American soil. From the death of the children, the killing of children, shedding of blood, to the actual day that the plague just hits America, falls upon America. It's 50 years, one Jubilee to the exact date.
Let's talk about this for a minute from a theological perspective. Is God just being mean?
Yeah.
Is God just being petty? What is God's message to bring it back 50 years? And what's his message to America on this situation?
Yeah, well, this is, no, God is never petty and he's never mean, but he is just and he is righteous and he is of love. Therefore, he cannot say you can just shed the blood, murder 60 million children and nothing happened. Everything's fine. No, that cannot be. That's not love. So the fact is, it's actually mercy because we killed 60 million children. It's merciful, to get a wake-up call, like this, or the plague. God is merciful, and sometimes his mercy is severe, But the thing is that you cannot do this. You cannot, it's clear from the very beginning of the Bible. You shed the blood of the innocent, blood will be shed. That death is to death. God is a God of justice, but he's also a God of mercy. He also died so we would be saved, from judgment as well. Gave his own life.
Yeah, and to me, as people watching, you look in the Old Testament and you do have these cycles and these patterns. And as you mentioned, the templates, you have David committed a sin with the census and 70,000 people died. It wasn't David, but yet God holds people accountable for their leadership.
Yeah.
And so the leadership made these decisions back in the 70s, and now we're reaping the whirlwind on it. One of the other fascinating things is, I love the connection you make from some of the geography in the land of Israel, again, as a template for the world. And one of those is the Valley of Hinnom, in the sense you compare it to New York. Kind of talk about that.
Yeah, it's not only converging in time, it's converging in space. Because when Jeremiah prophesied over the Valley of Hinnom, where they killed their children, he said it's going to be changed to the Valley of Slaughter. In other words, the death that you started there is coming back there. Well, is there a Valley of Hinnom in America, or what is America's Valley of Hinnom? There is one, and that is, it's New York. Number one, New York is the place where abortion on demand really was heralded to the rest of the nation. In fact, the Supreme Court, when Roe versus Wade actually made reference to New York's law, so New York really pioneered it to the continent of America. And then the other thing is that, not only that, New York is America's abortion capital. It's the capital of the nation. More children, their blood has been shed in New York than any other place. So it is the Valley of Hinnom of America. So the question is, then, when this plague comes, would there be any focus on New York? It's exactly what happened, if you remember. When the plague came to America, and then America became the center of COVID for the world, then New York became this COVID capital of America, which is the capital of the world. So New York became the global capital of the plague. The abortion capital became the plague capital. And the thing is that there were, in fact, 1 out of every 3 cases of COVID in the world were in America at that time. In America, 1 out of every 2 was in the little tiny land of New York, little tiny sliver. So now here's the thing. It was so much so that on one date it reached a milestone, and it was April 10th. New York had more cases of this plague than any other nation in the world, including China. More in New York, okay? Now, the thing is that it was April 10th. Now, is that anything? Go back 50 years from that date, and is there anything significant? April 10th, 1970. New York legalized abortion in New York on April 10th, 1970. So it's the place, it's the time, it's everything.
Yeah, to me, you start putting those together, and what I found is the way that you developed it in the book was, again, you went back in the early times, again in the early part of the Jubilee, and you just said, it's kind of like all your other books too as well, that God is showing you, hey, take a look, get in there. There's something here to see about these dates, and it's not coincidence, or it's not just random. Yeah. It happens on exactly. I mean, to me, that's the hand of God. Yeah. in giving a loving warning to people that he's trying to call people back to repentance. Yeah. The other thing, again, that as we talk about space, not only the Valley of Hinnom, but I thought it was fascinating just talking about the Eastern. I want to talk about the Western Gate, but let's talk about the Eastern Gate first.
Yeah, one of the things is that when Jeremiah prophesied over that Valley of Hinnom, he did it by the gate. He did it by the Potter's Gate. And the thing is that they were killing their children. The Valley of Hinnom was right by the gate of Jerusalem. They were killing their children by the gate. So have we killed our children by the gate? Number one. Number two, the Bible talks about judgment coming to the gates. The judgment will come to your gate. Well, does America have a gate? It doesn't have wall. I mean, it's not a walled city, but does it? Yes. And the gate of America, is New York. That's the gateway, Statue of Liberty. Everything comes in and out. That is always been the gate of America. And so what happened? Number one, it's interesting how so many judgments happen there. 9/11 there. So many things happen. So much evil begins there, and so much has come upon it. So we saw, you have this thing, you have this plague coming upon New York. Okay, at the gate. But a gate is also a place where not just you come to, you go through. So could New York have been a gate through a throughway in all this? Well, here's the thing. 50 years ago, 1970, abortion didn't just come to New York. It spread to the nation through New York. In fact, for those first 3 years until Roe versus Wade, the majority of abortions in America were performed in New York. And it spread. People from different states would come. It spread abortion throughout the entire nation, and literally, ultimately, to Roe versus Wade. So it was the gateway through abortion. Most abortion. Now, all right, let's go 50 years later. Could there be a mystery here? Well, when the plague came to us, and they didn't realize this, Mondo, until they did genetic studies on the virus. And what they found out is that if you had COVID, most likely, most of the cases of COVID came through the gate of New York, through the Eastern Gate, the same gate where we killed our children. The same gate where that death came through, the same death, the same way this plague came to the same gate. And that's the Eastern Gate. Okay, but now we alluded to the Western Gate. The thing is, when abortion came to America that year, 1970, there was one other gate on the continent, and it was the Western Gate. It was Washington State. That was the other gate. There were two gates, 1970, on the continent. So the question now is, 50 years later, could there be a mystery here? Well, the answer is, Mondo, that when the plague came to America, it came through New York and one other gate, Washington State. In fact, patient zero, the first case, was in Washington State. And it was on the day that New York first started moving to abortion. I mean, so it's 50 years, exactly. And so consider this. I mean, think about this. If you had COVID, or anybody who did, the virus bore the markers of the two gates by which America shed the blood of its children exactly 50 years before.
This again. You think about it. You can't make this stuff up. But I'm thankful that the Lord has allowed you to see these things and to bring them about again, to be as a reminder for those that are watching that God is not silent. God is always active. He's moving. He is seeking again to draw people to Himself, but He does hold people accountable. It reminds me of Galatians 6:7 that don't be deceived. God is not mocked. What a person sows, they're going to reap. And again, God is showing mercy here. But again, another connection that you make is with Abraham Lincoln and the prophet Jeremiah and COVID. I mean, how in the world does that fit together?
Okay. Well, Jeremiah said the principle is, and we know the biblical principle said, for the blood of the children, this is going to come back. So one is going to match the other. Abraham Lincoln, in his second inaugural, said, he saw it as a judgment, the Civil War, and he said this is for slavery, that every drop of blood that is shed by the lash of slavery, the whip, will be matched by a drop of blood shed by the sword of war. So the question has to be, it's the unavoidable question, the unaskable question, could there be a match with also not only all the dates and all the places and all the exactness, but also with the numbers, the magnitude? Well, here's the thing. In the first 3 years from the time abortion entered until Roe versus Wade, that's that critical period, 1970 to 73, how many children were killed? The answer is 1.3 million. 1.3 million. 50 years later, you have another 3-year period of a plague that matches, each one is the Jubilee of the other. And so how many Americans died? The answer is 1.3 million. Exactly, the plague struck the exact number of the blood of the children that were shed 50 years before. You can't do that. I mean, and this is just the beginning of the mystery.
Yeah. I mean, again, I want people to know that it's not that God is being unkind or mean here, but He is a God of justice, and there's serious repercussions for when we reject His word and we deny, and of course we go after the innocent.